Professor Worgley is here. We're moving on down to setting up our production server. The first thing we need to do, instead of typing sudo all the time, is we need to change into a root shell. There's a few ways to do it. One of the easiest ways is just to do sudo-i. You'll see it change from Ubuntu to root. So we created our AWS account. We logged in. We launched an instance. We set up a Ubuntu 18.04. We opened up the firewall to allow 22, 80, and 443. We logged in with Ubuntu SSH. We did an upgrade, update, and now we're switching over to our root user so we can set up the host name. Now, if I type host name, okay, -f, and then /etc host name. So at this time, I have not set a host name. So if I do an echo, okay, if you remember PHP, echo is like a print. I'm going to print the name of my server into the host name file. So what do you want the name of your server to be? Well, I recommend thinking about a domain name, and you can actually go over to Namecheap. We're going to use Namecheap later to get our domain names, purchase our domain names. So if you go over to Namecheap here, you can actually search for a domain name to see if it's available. One of the domain names that I bought was professorworglies.com. So I search for professorworglies.com. You'll see that professorworglies.com is not available. You can make me an offer, but some of the others are available. So you can search maybe your name or a business name or just a domain name you like to purchase and see if it's available. That way you can use it as your host name. So for mine, I'm going to use, I could use a business name, Streamline, or I could use professorworglies.com, whatever you want it to be. I'll go ahead and put Professor Worglies, and I'm going to echo that into etc host name. Okay, so now if I click the up arrow, I can look through all of my previous commands. I'll go back to this, and I'm going to type it in to see if the host name has been correct. So in order to print the host name out, just type the keyword host name. Okay, you'll see it's Professor Worglies. Okay, now you'll see I'm at root at this IP address. Okay, or I was at Ubuntu at this IP address. If I click exit, you'll see I'm going to log out of the root, go back to Ubuntu. If I do exit again, I logged out of Ubuntu. Now I'm back to my local machine. So if I click the up arrow, SSH, back into my instance, okay, you'll see that's changed now. It's Ubuntu at professorworglies.com, okay, or just at Professor Worglies. So now instead of looking at this long IP address, you know what host you're at because we've changed the host name. Okay, and later we're going to use that actual domain name. So it actually makes sense to be called Professor Worglies because we have professorworglies.com. Okay, if I do an ls /etc default, you'll want to look to see if you have a file called DHC. If you have it there, you'll want to delete it. It starts with DHC. So they're in alphabetical order. Here's the D's. I don't see it. I can go ahead and move on. I think they got rid of it from Ubuntu 14. So once Ubuntu 16 came out, I think they got rid of this file. But if you see it here, you'll want to remove it, or you'll want to comment out where it says host name by putting a # in front of it. But if you don't have that file, you can go ahead and skip this step, and most of you should not have that file. Now, we also need to change the host file. So I'm going to do sudo. I like to use vim or vi. You can also use nano, depending on what editor you want to use. I'm going to use vi, so I'm going to do /etc. I'm going to do host with an S. So I'm going to open up this file. Now you'll see it's basically just called localhost. Okay, and that's fine. A lot of times you will use the keyword localhost to reference the current server, but we're actually going to put our IP address in there, the domain, and then the host name. So if I go back to my AWS console, exit out of the connect screen, select the server, scroll down, you'll see the public DNS down here. You'll also see the IP address. Now, all servers are referenced by this IP address. So I have 3.133.129.19. But if I want to go to Facebook's website, it'd be really hard to go to 3.133.129.19. That's hard to memorize. But it's easy to remember Facebook.com, or it's easy to remember ProfessorWorglies.com. So I also have a public DNS, which is a domain name, and that will connect to the IP address. And in fact, Amazon's EC2 actually has the IP address in the domain name. Okay, but this is hard to remember, so later we're actually going to set up our own domains and connect them to this server. But for now, copy your IP address, come back to the terminal. So in Vim, you have to click on I for insert. I'm going to erase the content there. I'm going to paste the domain, so I can do Control V or Command V if you're on a Mac. If you're on Git Bash, you may have to right click the file to paste. Git Bash, it is a little bit harder to paste than to copy. You can do a right click if necessary. Paste your IP, put your domain. Okay, so put your domain. So I'm going to be ProfessorWorglies.com. Okay, ProfessorWorglies.com. And then what's my host name? My host name is just Professor Worglies. Now, this could be whatever you want it to be. For right now, it can be a fake domain. Okay, it doesn't have to be available or anything like that. You can put whatever you want here for now. But later, it would be good to match the domain used. And I know that I'm going to use ProfessorWorglies.com, so that's why I'm putting my domain here. And I know I'm using the Professor Worglies host name. So if you want to make sure this is finalized, you can come over to Namescheap and finalize the domain you're getting. Or you could just set a temporary one and come back and change it once you have finalized your domain. Now, once you're in insert mode, you have to click Escape to stop inserting text. And then you have to hit Shift colon. So a colon actually appears, Shift colon. And then you do WQ for writing quit. But I'm lazy. I like to do shortcuts. So X is also write and quit. So I click on enter. So that file has been, I wrote to that file and then I exited the file. Okay, so now I've set the host name for the server, which you can see, and I've changed the host file. So the server configuration will also see the new domain name and the new host name in the host file. Okay, with that following IP address. Okay, next, we're going to set the time zone. This is important because the server that I just set up, if I go back and look, I'm in the Ohio region, or maybe North Virginia or California, Oregon. You usually want to pick one that's closest to you. So I'm doing US East 2, which is in Ohio. Ohio, North Virginia, maybe one's a little bit closer to me, but they're fairly similar. And it's going to be, the server's going to be in their corresponding time zone. And a lot of times the server will be set up for UTC time zone. So it's good for the challenges and for your users to go ahead and set the time zone for the server. What we're going to be using is DPKG. Okay, it's a package manager for Debian-based systems. It's more lightweight than Ubuntu, but it's a Linux-like computer operating system that's composed of entirely free software. Okay, so it already comes pre-configured on Ubuntu. All you do is type DPKG. I'm going to use DPKG to reconfigure TZ data. Okay, TZ data is our time zone data. Okay, so I'm going to use DPKG, reconfigure the time zone data. Click on enter. Okay, it must be ran as a root. If I type sudo, I can do that, or I can go ahead and just switch back over to the root user. So I'll do sudo-i. If I click on up, you will not see that command because I did not run that command as the root. I ran it under Ubuntu. So I have to type it again, DPKG, reconfigure, time zone data. Okay, a little UI pops up. I'm going to select what region you're in. So for Facebook or for big companies, they have servers all over the place. They got them in China, they got them in USA, they got them in Europe, they got them in different parts of Asia and all over the place, India. So for here, I'm going to select US and I'm going to select Central. And if you make a site or you make a business and it becomes large, you'll want to do the same. So if I have a server that's in Central USA and people from California are trying to access it, it may be slow because it has to travel across the line. It has to travel that distance. So the response time may be slow. And it'll be especially true if I have a server in the USA and people from China are trying to access it. A lot of things are banned in China, so Google's banned in China. I don't know if you can even look at Facebook in China. But conceptually, you can think about that. If I have a server in USA and people in other countries are trying to access it, it's going to be really slow. Okay, it has to travel that entire distance. So you'll want to have a lot of servers set up, one in the West Coast, one in the Central, one on the East Coast, one in every country, depending on how big your company is. But we're in the Central time zone, so I'll select that. It changed from Tuesday, September 1st, back to Monday, August 31st. So it was UTC time zone. Now it's Central Daylight Savings time zone. Okay, it's Daylight Saving time zone. A student asked me, well, what happens during Daylight Savings? Will the time zone change? I think it will. If it doesn't, it's always easy to reconfigure the server. You can have a quick script that checks on that date and reconfigures the time, although I do think that it will change during the Daylight Savings time. Okay, if I type in date, you can see if it's correct or not. So it's Monday, August 31st. It's 1934, so that'd be 7:34 p.m. If I go to my system clock, you'll see it says the same. So the date is correct, the time zone is correct. We've done that successfully. Next, we're going to add a new limited user. We're not going to log into Ubuntu anymore. We're going to log into our own user. Stick with Professor Wergeles, and we'll see you in the next video.